Welcome to Lead the Room podcast, where we help those with great ideas and brilliant minds to become amazing leaders and build teams full of purpose, connection, creativity, and courage, transforming people's experience of workplaces and leadership. In 2018, we decided that the leadership playbook we saw around us wasn't working for the needs of our teams and our organisations, or frankly for us. So we ripped it up, built a new one, and watched the incredible impact that came from leading in a completely counter-cultural way. This journey transformed our experience of work, team culture, delivery, and felt so good to us. And our approach has served us and our teams in the good times and in the tough times alike. So now we're here to share our stories, experiences with you, so you can become the leader you want to be, build teams that deliver amazing things in amazing environments, and inspire those around you to do the same. You and your leadership are what our workplace and people desperately need. We'll be laughing, crying, and learning together. Let's get started.
So hi and welcome to the podcast this week. We are talking all about roles and responsibilities. Now, before you think, no, I'm not listening to this. This is going to be dry. It's going to be dull. It's going to be boring. Think again, because actually we want you to flip the script, right, on this week's episode and think about it a bit differently, because we think at Lead the Room that being clear on roles and responsibilities in your team, being clear on who is doing what, is one of those things that can actually be the difference between you getting things done and having a high performing team that we all dream of and actually not. And actually it's a major source of drama in teams when there aren't clear roles and responsibilities. So in this week's episode, we're going to talk a bit about why that is, share some stories as always from our leadership journeys about how when we have got it wrong and when we got it right on roles and responsibilities. And then we're going to end with 3 really easy tips that you can put into practice this week. So Lyndsey, kick us off then with why is it really important to be clear on roles and responsibilities in teams, and what is the link between being clear on them and high performing teams?
Yeah. So I think it seems like such an obvious thing, doesn't it, Briony? Which I think sometimes like maybe that's why we don't necessarily talk about, or it's like, God, that is so boring. Like, of course we know what we're doing. Like, we've been recruited into the team. But actually that is such a dangerous assumption to make, and one that we often do make. And I think it's really, we're all about creating high performing teams here at Lead the Room, and that's why we're encouraging you to follow all these tips and approaches to create them. And I think the foundational stuff, again, like Briony said, is sometimes seems dry, but sometimes it is actually the most important stuff. And if you just think, gosh, I know Briony and I, because we have discussed this so many times in past roles over the years, but the amount of times that you're in a team and you think, right, Sue sat next to me. I've got actually no idea what Sue does in my team. Like, what is she doing? And that then descends into, oh gosh, Briony just emailed that person. I thought that was my job. Like, I was about to email them. I drafted the email, but she's just put me to the post. Oh, why has she been asked to do it? And you can really quickly see how that descends into kind of a little bit of friction, and suddenly it's escalating, and then you've got this drama in your team that is totally unnecessary, because actually there's no friction and drama between those people. It is about the fact that they don't have a clue what they're doing. And if you think you've spent time doing something, thinking about something, and suddenly someone just storms in there and does it because they think they should be doing it, it's just chaos. And I think no matter how brilliant the people in your team are, how skilled they are, how whatever they're bringing to the team, you can have the most skillful, dynamic, intelligent people in your team. If they do not know what they're doing, they will not perform to the best of their ability. So again, it seems obvious, but it is astonishing, Briony, isn't it? How many times leaders, including us in past roles, have not gripped this and have not done it properly. And therefore the consequences are much bigger than you'd expect, potentially.
And I think you're right when you said it, like in that first sentence, Lyndsey, like the assumption that you make when you come in to teams that people do know what they're doing, and they understand like the boundaries between what Sue is doing and what Joe's doing, you know, that, and actually it is a really dangerous assumption. I think I definitely, and I'll share my story in a minute, but that's the assumption I made, and it didn't work out well for me. And so I think just, you know, whether it's when you started a new leadership role or when you're starting a new project, just taking, it doesn't even have to be long, but taking time to actually be clear on who is doing what, just helps you avoid drama that really needn't be there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, kick us off with your story, Bryony, because obviously that's what everyone's here to hear, is our stories and then how to learn from them.
Yeah, so I think, like I said, so my story is about when I joined a team as a leader, and yeah, I just didn't even, the team had been going for like years, so I just didn't even question that people, that I was the newbie, I was the one who was kind of working out my role, but I didn't even question that other people might not really know what their roles are. But you know, and you get like 2 weeks in, you're like, well, I don't really, like, things aren't working great, but that's probably just me because I don't understand, and everyone's adjusting to maybe a different leadership style. And by the end of like week 3, week 4, I'm like, no, this is not a good place. Like, people is like constant like undertone of friction and drama, sort of bickering between people. You know, I say, well, who's doing this piece of work then? And 3 people say, well, I'm doing it. And then they're like, well, I'm doing it. You know, all of this kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh, because nobody is really clear on who is doing what. And so what we did then as a team is to sort of map out then what are the things that have to be done as a team, what are the individual skill sets that we all are bringing to the team, and then trying to kind of match up, you know, most optimally those things. Obviously that doesn't always work because, you know, there are some things that have to happen that would be nobody's first choice to do but nonetheless need to happen. But it was really clear by the, like, once I'd sort of got a bit settled, that actually the fact that people weren't clear on who was doing what and who was accountable for what and how they needed to hand off work between each other was causing, like, you know, not major drama, but just like it was causing unnecessary pain for everybody, and it was stopping us from actually really getting things done. And then once we'd done this work on roles and responsibilities, actually it was, everybody noticed, like by month 2, like marked improvement in how everyone was working together and that kind of thing. So I think it's really back to your point on assumptions. Like, sometimes obviously it takes a while to find your feet as a leader when you've got a new role, but actually just coming in and asking some of those questions, I think that's what I wish I'd done. I wish I had come in and sort of asked more intentionally, like, who is responsible for this? And it might have surfaced some of that stuff earlier.
Definitely. And I think you used a really key word there, Bryony, about that accountability. And it was
Mm,
spoken before in terms of like team drama. And I think that accountability piece, and we probably all can think of situations where you've left at the end of a really busy day or week and you think, what is Bryony actually doing? Like, she's
yeah.
done nothing. Like, she's delivered nothing this week. But actually they might be squirreling away doing something, but there's no transparency, there's no clarity. And I think that accountability for a lot of people really causes quite a lot of kind of that resentment feeling, doesn't it? About, we're not actually working as a team and this feels really uncomfortable.
Yeah, because you're right. Like, there's not that transparency about who's doing what and who's accountable for what, it's easy then for other team members to like make up a story, isn't there? Like you say, of like, well, Bryony's like, what? Who knows what she's
Yeah.
doing? Like, she
Yeah.
seems to
Yeah.
be busy all the time and going to meetings, but what's the actual output? It's easy for then team members to make up stories and start gossiping with each
Yes.
other about, you know, so and so's not working hard enough or not focused enough. So it really is important to be transparent, like you say. But what's your story, Lyndsey? Tell us about your
Yeah.
experience.
So I guess on a similar vein, because I guess a lot of these stories are going to be slightly similar, but I had a situation where a group of people who had very specific, unique skills were brought in and like during like a crisis kind of surge, right? Which is probably a situation familiar to a lot of our listeners. Like, you've got something kind of
Yeah.
really important happening, you've got to bring together these experts into one place. And then I was brought in to lead that team. The team had actually already been assembled before I was brought in. And again, these individuals had been selected because, okay, they've got a unique skill set and they're going to bring subject matter knowledge to this actual problem. And that was why they were being brought in. But that's what they're bringing. Like, that is like their knowledge or their specific skill.
Hmm.
That's not their specific role or responsibility within that team. Now, I think what happened is, at the time, people had obviously, that was really high paced, fast paced. And people said, okay, bring all these people together and voila, you've got a team, right? Here we go, like perform. And they did, because they were highly skilled, they were high performing individuals. They got on with it. So when I joined the team, on the surface, it looked like the team were doing really well. There was a lot of output. They were kind of like, they were doing really well. They seemed kind of as happy as you can in that kind of like surge mode. There was a lot of energy. But again, it didn't take long for kind of conversations with them and then noticing a little bit of overlap. Like, do you actually know why you know why you've been brought into the team, because you've got unique skill or knowledge? But what are you actually doing? What have you been charged with doing in this team? And that conversation had actually never happened. It was clear why these individuals had been brought into the team, because their unique skill set and subject matter expertise, but no one had had the conversation with them about, okay, Briony, we've invited you in this team to work on this problem because of your knowledge. You are now going to be responsible for this strand of work or this task, blah, blah, blah. And I think because, and this is an interesting point as well, I think, around people do have unique skills or subject matter expert being brought in because of that, almost feel they then can't kind of, they've got something special about them that they can't then ask, like, what do you actually want me to do? What am I meant to be doing? There's assumption that, well, they'll just come in and they'll know exactly what they're doing and they'll get the job done. But they knew what the overall job was, but they didn't know the specific task that needed to be done. And interestingly, what I saw there not only was less of probably the accountability, because that kind of the drama coming from that, but more around like a competitive nature of these individuals with these very unique skills and subject matter expertise. It almost became like, because they didn't know what they were doing, they tried to do everything so that they had something to show for at the end. I've been brought in for X reason and look what I've delivered. But actually, they were all trying to deliver the same thing. Rather than working as a team to deliver it, they were almost working against each other. And this competition really kind of came to the surface. Anyway, I guess similar to you, Briony, in terms of approaching okay, let's just take a step back, which in a fast-paced surge mode is quite a tricky thing to do. But it was absolutely the right thing to do, because we couldn't have continued with the approach that we were taking.
Yeah, and I think you bring out a really important point there, Lyndsey, of like you said, there's a real difference, isn't there, between people, there's or like another assumption, I suppose, that just because people are highly skilled and subject matter experts, that they know the role that you need them to fulfill in this moment, in this project, in this specific team, in this specific environment.
Yeah.
And actually, by not taking the time to do that, you're leaving a lot open, like you said, to them, people misinterpreting that, and then that, the project not going well, or in your case, like, you're working in a fast-paced environment, like things have to be done. If they're not done right, then you have to spend more time that you didn't have redoing them. So there's something really important about, and that's why this is such an important tip or like a topic for leaders, about just like in that environment, in a crisis environment, you don't need to spend like 3 hours debating it all. No, don't do that. Even just like a 15-minute stand up each day that says, right, these are the tasks that needs to be done. Who's doing these things? How are you handing off? How are you working together?
Yeah.
Like that, it doesn't have to be long, does it? But it is important that it happens, because then everybody has the same sense of direction, purpose, knows what the objective is, and they're all pulling in the same direction.
Yeah. And I think as well, for you as the leader in that moment, to really understand what your role is.
Yeah.
Because there was a point that I was like, well, what am I actually meant to be doing? Like, where do I fit in here? And what do you need from me? Because again, I was brought in for a specific reason, but there was no clarity. No one said to me, like, we need you to do X, Y, and Z. You're responsible for this. You make a lot of assumptions. And I think, like we say, those assumptions lead to a lot of tension, and just not the best output. And that's what we need to do. This is building the foundations to have the best output you can for your team and your organization.
And a couple of weeks ago, we talked about drama on the podcast, didn't we? And how you kind
We
of
did,
avoid
yeah.
it. And, we've got this amazing resource in our learning lab about how to eliminate drama from your team life. So do go and check that out if you're interested in kind of knowing all of our tips. But this is definitely, when we talked about that topic on the podcast a few weeks ago, this is being clear on roles and responsibilities is a cause of drama, but it's also one, as you said at the beginning, Lyndsey, that is within our control as leaders to try and eliminate as a source of drama. So let's go into some tips now and talk about like how can our leaders who are listening to this podcast take some really simple, actionable tips into their week to try and make roles and responsibilities clear in their teams.
So we've got 3 tips, Briony. So yeah, kick us off with the first one.
So the first one, and this is a personal favourite of mine, and if you've worked with me, you'll know one of my key leadership tools and resources are post-it notes. I love a post-it note. And so this is like, I call it project post-it note. So when you're bringing everyone together at the start of a project, whether it's you've worked together as a team for like a long time, or whether you've brought in some outside resources, or like in your case, Lyndsey, of like, it's a completely new team that's just formed as like a surge effort or a stripey team or whatever, is to write down on post-its all the things that need to be done. And then what you do like one on each post-it, you lay them all out and then you kind of assign them to people. And by doing that, it's just really clear. Like everyone then has transparency that we talked about earlier on, all the things that need to be done. Everyone is clear on who is doing what. And everyone is clear on what they are personally responsible and accountable for. And so it's also a really nice way of helping everybody in the team see the bigger picture and the whole, like the whole of the objective that we're all pulling towards. So I really like this because, again, it literally takes like 15-20 minutes for like, and really practical, really visual. And obviously, if you're working in like a remote team or hybrid team, there's loads of like virtual tools that you can use to do this kind of thing, like over Teams or whatever. So I really like this one because it just makes things really clear.
Yeah. And like you say, all of our tips and all of our approaches to leadership are not things that should take hours and days. Like it is quick. They are quick wins that if you get into the habit of doing them, get them in your leadership practice, they just become part of the way you work, right, Bryony?
Yeah. And I think sometimes like we overlook them because they're like so simple, like, oh yeah,
They're
like
too
I have
obvious.
post-its on my desk. This is it's too obvious. How is this really a tip? But actually, well, when did you last do that though, right?
Yes.
And so I think that's the thing, like lots of the stuff that we share here isn't like rocket science. Anybody could do it, but lots of people don't do it. And so that's why, like some of these simple things are just like easy practical things that you can do, but just put it in your leadership practice.
And again, going back to like, it is obvious, but why don't people do it is because I think so much of our leadership training don't tell us how to do things. They tell us why we should do these things, why we should kind of look at roles and responsibilities, but not, okay, well, how do I actually do that on a day-to-day basis? What does that look like?
Yeah.
So tip number 2 is about, I suppose, like, so taking one step back from that kind of project kind of plan approach and thinking about actual job design. So thinking about from when looking across your team and when new people join your team, like being very clear about the jobs of those in your team. So what is your job, what is your role, and what are you responsible for at kind of a higher level, and being very transparent about that. I mean, I can think of the amount of teams that I've joined where I'm thinking, and I'll pick on Sue again, I don't know who Sue is, but thinking, I mean, I have no idea what's in Sue's kind of job design, what her objectives are, what her roles and responsibilities are. Like, I know what she's working on day to day, kind of, but there was no transparency. So I think it is absolutely your responsibility as the leader. No one else is going to do that in terms of sharing the job designs, the roles of everyone in your team, making it transparent. Again, like as Bonnie says, there could be something that you do. I know, start of a team meeting, you chunk out kind of 10 minutes, the team meeting, you kind of talk through it. And I think it's specifically talking through anywhere where there's maybe going to be a little bit of overlap, which there will be because you're working together as a team, right? There's going to be areas, but okay, well, if there's bits of overlap, like where are the boundaries? Where do I know where Briony finishes and Lyndsey starts? What is that handover? What is that? So it doesn't, again, we're removing friction, or we're removing any opportunity for friction to arise there, Briony, aren't we?
Yeah, exactly. And I sort of think like one of the things I love about the team I'm in at the moment is that everybody in the team can describe like in 3 sentences what it is that they're responsible
Yeah,
for, so that when we have new
powerful.
joiners, and we quite frequently do,
Yeah,
they can quite quickly understand like, oh, this person is responsible for these set of things. If a thing looks like this, then it's probably that person.
yeah.
And it does just make things, yeah, it makes things so much easier. And again, like you said, I've been in so many teams where you start and nobody even tells you what everyone else is doing. So there's also a kind of like, think how you onboard people and how you welcome people into the team and help them understand what everyone's responsible for as well.
And yeah, and I think to remember that these like job design roles and responsibilities, they're kind of living things, right? They're living
Yeah.
kind of documents, could we say? And that you have to constantly review them, constantly make sure that they are kind of up to date, that they are relevant to what you're trying to do. So it's not just oh, those results, yeah, we talked about that 3 years ago. Yeah, we maybe should refresh it. Like, yeah, you need to be kind of regularly speaking about this thing. And I think maybe like quarterly reviews are probably a good kind of checkpoint to make sure that you are. But as you say, as people join the team, leave the team, there's going to be churn. So that's absolutely something that you need to kind of be on top of during those transition periods.
Yeah, but again, like you said, Lindsay, like these, I've been into other teams where on the opposite end of the spectrum, where they have spent like months
Oh yeah, I
agonizing
know.
over role descriptions and making these beautiful documents only for them to be out of date in the next,
Yeah,
like, next week or whatever. And
yeah,
so I think, again, for our leaders listening, this isn't about like spending like hours and hours in workshops, you're ironing out every single last detail. No, it's being able to say like in 3 bullets, here is my job, in 3 bullets, here is your job, or whatever. You're trying to keep things like, simple and quick, like, not kind of, because I think like who has time to spend 4 months doing these things, but yet some people do, right?
well, people make an industry of it, don't they? And I
Yeah.
think there is almost this kind of like, oh well, we need to do this properly, so we need to kind of sit down and workshop it and like really go through it thoroughly. Like, no, you don't. Like, you absolutely don't need to do that. Like, just like you say, this none of these things are there to take hours out of your day, because you haven't got that. What about the
Yeah.
third one, Bryony?
So the final one, and this is one that I would always put as note to self, Bryony, is being really clear in your comms as a leader. So that you've had these discussions, whether it's like the project post-it conversation or like a team roles and responsibilities conversation. The next thing you really want to do is to be really clear in your comms to your team about who is doing what. So make sure to write it down, because again, it's really helpful for people to have things to refer back to, but also for you to refer back to. And again, like don't spend hours crafting like War and Peace, like 17 paragraph email to your team about like who is responsible for each individual item, itemized under like 212 bullet points, on some kind of spreadsheet or whatever. And maybe if there are some cases where you need to do that, but more often than not, I have found you do not need to do that.
Yeah.
And like a simple email that says, these are the key tasks for this project, and here is who is responsible and accountable for them, does the trick. Everybody's going to read that. It's going to take them 5 minutes. When they have a question about, oh, I've got a comms thing. Oh, right, I can see Lindsay's doing that. They can refer back to it. But keeping it really simple and clear, easy to understand is the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. So we really hope that I guess us sharing our stories, our experiences, you think, oh gosh, yeah, that absolutely resonates. I've been in a team like that. Or you're thinking, gosh, I haven't been clear on the roles and responsibilities of my team. That's absolutely something that I need to grip this week. Then there's 3 very easy, practical things that don't take you much time at all to do. But do remember that it is your responsibility as the leader of the team to be make sure that you actually do set this foundation. As Brian said at the beginning, this might sound dry, it might sound obvious, but do check yourself as leader and say, but okay, but when was the last time we actually had a chat about that in our team? We're probably overdue one. Yeah, we've got a new joiner next week. Perfect opportunity to kind of refresh that and do it. So look for the opportunities. Don't look 3 months ahead in the calendar and put a half a day workshop in for it. Do it tomorrow. Like, there's no excuse not to do it tomorrow. And we honestly, the difference that we've seen in our own teams and other teams about the foundational stuff like roles and responsibilities, genuinely is the difference between an average team and one that has incredible impact in their organizations.
Yeah, that's 100% right, Lyndsey. And I think for those of you who want to know more and understand a bit more about how to navigate drama in your team, and have like all of our deep dive resources on that, we've got, like I said, our how to manage drama in your team learning lab challenge on our website at www.leadtheroom.co.uk, which you can pick up there. And we really look forward to hearing how you get on with this week.
Fab. Go. And every week, we love you to walk the week with us. And this is about celebrating, learning, and growing. So every week, really taking that time to reflect on the week. So yeah, we share ours every week, and we would love to hear your walk the weeks as well. So do leave us a comment over on Instagram and let us know. So Briony, what are you celebrating this week?
So I'm celebrating, I had a really good appraisal with my boss this week. So I'm
Amazing.
celebrating that actually.
Yeah.
Number one, because I shout out to my boss, like he's really good at making time for like proper line management. Like he always prioritizes our one-to-ones, and you know how we feel
Yeah.
about that, listeners, on Lead the Room. And then he always puts a lot of effort into how we do our appraisals. And actually that's a topic we're going to cover on the podcast in the coming weeks.
Yeah.
And what was really nice is that he like got 360 feedback from people, and it was all really positive. And like some of the things that I've been trying to work on, I could hear in the feedback that I've been successful in shifting things. So I felt really good about that.
Amazing. And we spoke before, didn't we, Briony, about some of our previous feedback as leaders, just being like, that is not helpful. Yes, I know that I'm good at X, or I know that this is, but so was it helpful? Like, were there things in there that you thought, yeah, absolutely, I recognize I can use this?
Yeah, and I think that's because he always does preparation and he always gets 360 feedback. There's always something in there like, oh, actually, I can see that is a challenge for me right now. Like it might not have been 6 months ago, but in this moment now, I can see that is, and we'll always talk that through. But no, yeah, so it was really, genuinely helpful.
Perfect. What about you learning? What's on your learning patch this week?
So this week, we're kind of thinking about our team ways of working and just like refreshing that. And so we're thinking particularly and learning about like different ways to kind of share information, to gather together as a team to build connection, but without it being like overly burdensome. So just kind of doing a bit of a review and a stock take on like the meetings that we really need, what is their purpose and that kind of thing. So yeah, just the thing that, again, we do this periodically, and it's really helpful to do it periodically, because what has worked for the last year or so, again, new people join, they have different preferences, or your team like dynamic shifts. Actually, it's really helpful to do it from time to time. So just learning a bit more about that.
Love it. And what about growth? For you?
So I would say I've been having a bit of frustration at work recently, and I have found myself sort of like venting a bit. And now, like, there's a fine line, isn't there, I think, between like when you're venting to your team in a way that kind of like shows your humanness. Like none of us are immune from frustrations. Like we all have emotions, don't we? And you can't just like leave them at the door. I'm really not, neither of us are a believer in that. But there's a bit of a fine line, and that's what I've been kind of reflecting on, is what's the line between venting in a way that's kind of like, you know, shows my humanity and also shows a bit of empathy for the team and allows them to also feel frustrated, because the situation we're in like is frustrating, frankly. And then what's like being too negative and like oversharing. Do you know what I mean?
I think that's such a relatable growth kind of point, because I can think of so many situations, and even probably like last week when you're almost, and not maybe just something you're venting about, but something that other people in the team are venting about, and you agree and you kind of go along with it, and you think, oh no, where's the line? And that is hard to find, definitely.
And I think I'm just trying to be like curious about it, I guess. Like sometimes I feel like that was okay. Other times I'm like, I probably could have used more professional language, or particularly when I'm frustrated with a person, just being really thoughtful about the language I use, and like if the other person walked in, like would I have wanted them to hear that, or if a friend of theirs walked in,
Yeah.
like how would I feel if it got back to them, kind of thing. So
Yeah. But
yeah.
do you sometimes use that kind of test of, would I say this to their face?
Mm,
That's sometimes what I say to myself. I think,
yeah.
okay, is it still, you can be like, you can vent about someone, you can be frustrated with someone, but like, is it still kind of kind, I suppose, in
Yeah.
terms of, would I say, look, Bryony, actually, like what you've done's made me feel like this today? Like, would I say it to their face? Because then it just descends into just having a good old bitch and moan, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
And do you want to do
Exactly.
that in front of your team? Yeah, really
Yeah.
useful one.
What about you, Lyndsey?
Oh,
What's your walk of the week?
so we've recently had a new member of our team join, and I think I mentioned them before, and they've been getting on great. But one of the things that I've noticed in the last week is the extent to which they're thriving in this environment, and their reflections upon why they're thriving so quickly, and her reflections are bound kind of the intentionality of how we set up the team, the processes in the team.
Yeah.
And again, going back to kind of today's topic around, some of this stuff is really on the surface really boring and really dry, and you think, oh god, I just want to get on with the cool work, I just want to get on and deliver and have results and make profit or whatever. But actually, they can only do that if they are in a setup that allows them to thrive. And very quickly, she has noticed how different the team feels to
Mm,
other teams that she's been in, and how quickly she is able to bring her best parts of her to work, and learn really quite rapidly, because she feels safe. She can ask all the questions. She
yeah.
feels supported. All those things. She has clarity on her role. Things that she said, even at the end of some of her jobs she's never had finishing a role, which is really quite
Wow.
sad. So that's made me feel like we are doing it right. Like, this stuff matters and it's noticed, and the impact is really quite tangible. So that felt like a real celebration, and a win
That's a
this
massive
week.
win, isn't it? And again, I think it just comes back to that. Some of this stuff, I think, like the leadership courses you go on, make it seem like leadership is so complicated.
Yeah.
And like, if to be doing it right, you have to have spent like hours agonizing everything. But actually, like you say, a lot of these things, like the roles and responsibilities we've been talking about today, it's actually quite easy. It's quite simple. Like, don't overcomplicate it. But
Yeah.
actually, the important thing is doing it. Like, just because it's easy doesn't mean that it's like you don't need to make it unnecessarily complicated. So yeah, that's a massive win. You should feel really proud for
Yeah,
yourself.
no, I think, I guess, back to kind of values and things, like one of my biggest joys in life is seeing other people
Mm,
succeed. And just to see her, she absolutely like just doing phenomenal in this job. And you can see the confidence, like,
yeah.
yeah, it's palpable and it's contagious as well, which I always think, like, when you've got that energy in a team, it absolutely is contagious. So yeah. So in terms of learning, we're working with a team really quite closely on a project that is going to take both of our teams actually to kind of change considerably in our approaches to something. And I think as a team, again, perhaps the way that we've kind of, what, not perhaps, I think the way that we have set up our team allows us to adjust. We, I think, positively embrace change and see where we can, okay, well, we need to be better as a team. We need to adapt as a team to be better at this. The team that we're working with are really, really struggling. They are, their mindsets are completely different. Their leadership style is very different. And in order for this project to work, we, both teams need to be on the same page. And
Hmm.
currently we're poles apart. So as a team, we kind of sat down last week to think, well, what is it that we're doing that we could kind of share our approach with them? And again, back to your point almost, Bryony, about kind of that balance, because we've probably spent a bit of time in our team having a good old moan about like how rigid this team are, how inflexible they are, how negative they are. Like, and I really hate working with negative people, because it just, the mood hoovers bring me down, and I really, really struggle. But what we're trying to do is, there's a fine line between kind of giving advice and saying, look, this is how we do it, without looking like you're bragging, without
Yeah.
being kind of patronizing. Um, so that's the kind of, we're trying to learn, again, back to language. And I think you mentioned this, Bryony, around what is the right language and approach to take with this team, because it's going to have to be baby steps to get them there, to almost make them to think that it's their idea. Because they already look at our team and think, you probably think you're better than us. It's not the case. We just got a very different approach. So learning about how best to approach this team, because we need to work with them, but we're just very on different pages at the moment.
Yeah. And then, so tell us then, how have you been growing this week, Lyndsey?
So I have had a couple of growth opportunities recently. We've moved into a bit of a phase in a program that I'm working on that people want to, and coming soon on a podcast about jargon, but a fail fast approach. So they want us to kind of like be taking really quick decisions and learn from that. And I think possibly if I look throughout my career, that's not really something that I've had to do a huge amount of, or I've kind of make decisions kind of quickly, but I probably have had a good amount of knowledge and have felt relatively comfortable doing it. However, over the last week, I'm definitely being forced more into it. No, you just need to make this decision now. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
And that has felt really uncomfortable. I've done it, but again, I think moving to that, growing in terms of how do I become a bit more comfortable in this space, and not, I guess, I'm definitely not in the space that I'm embracing it at the moment. I'm definitely in a space that's like, oh, this doesn't feel great. This kind of goes against everything that I know, and it feels okay, but I know we need to do it. So yeah, trying to get into that kind of like out your comfort zone, I guess, growing in that space. Yeah, that's where I am this week.
Yeah, and that's hard, isn't it? Because like you say, you need that psychological safety to actually fail fast. And again, we're talking about buzzwords next week, aren't we? So I think maybe we'll come back to failing fast as one of those buzzwords. Because it's easy to say, isn't it? But if the leadership haven't set up an environment where it is safe to fail fast, then actually you're not setting people up for success or to even want to experiment and get out of the comfort zone, make those bold decisions and choices that's actually needed to kind of experiment, be curious, really be innovative and try things, and then be okay if things don't work out.
Yeah.
And I think that is tough.
Yeah, I think linked to that, like the clarity around the why. Like,
yeah,
sometimes, I really struggle with like doing things for the sake of it or because we should be doing it. Like, if you tell me why we're doing this, what the purpose is, I'll get on board. But if it's like, oh, we're doing it because it's the latest buzzword and it's the latest trend to be doing it, I'm not so on board.
Yeah. Understood. Yeah, I feel the same. So listen, I hope that's been a really helpful episode for you on roles and responsibilities. And you can see that you've got 3 really easy, practical ways that you can start to be clear with your team about their roles and responsibilities and the reason why you need to do that to build your high-performing team. So do let us know how you get on. Drop us a DM over on Instagram or send us a message to hello@leadtheroom.co.uk, and we'd love to hear your feedback. A team full of purpose and results, people who are buzzing with ideas and the courage to try them out, and a place where you and the team can't wait for the weekly meeting. By listening to this episode, you are building your skills to become the leader that can make all this and more happen. But we want to hear from you. Tag us in your stories, send us a DM about your walk the week on Instagram so we can learn what's resonating with you most. And if you're up for helping us out and taking a moment to rate and review the podcast, send us a screenshot to hello@leadtheroom.co.uk so we can send you our 90-day leadership refresh as a thank you. Keep experimenting, and we can't wait to see you next week.